It's streaming on the Facebook. So, Three Angels at Albuquerque, Three Angels, Seventh-day Adventist Church, or SDA Church. Welcome, welcome. We're so glad that everyone's here. We're going to go ahead and have a small, just a prayer, and then we're going to get started. We're ready for you, so we'll go ahead and do that. Let's pray. Father in heaven, Lord, we thank you so much for this time that we have to come together. It's Sabbath, the sun has gone down. We are blessed to be here in this place, to listen and to learn and to apply in our lives. Lord, be with this meeting. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
There we are. Thank you, guys. All right, good evening. It is good to be here. I hope everybody's had their supper and are ready to leave the week behind us, because you've had a busy week when we're coming together and meeting the Sabbath here on Friday evening. Take a big deep breath and just say, okay, we're here, and we can focus our minds and clear our minds for something new. Tonight we're going to be talking about holistic service, kind of the posture of service and what it looks like to serve and how we serve. Because the way we serve, I am having an issue, aren't I? If they can give me, does it do this? This is what we do. All right, let me see. Does it different spot help? We'll see. You guys cue me in as I need to do something different. But I want to introduce you to Adventist Community Services. That's who we are. We also have Gladys Guerrero. I'm Colette Newer. I am with the North American Division Adventist Community Services. I'm the Associate Director for that ministry. I'm coming from the Seattle office, or Western Washington is where I was before that, so I'm a little more West Coast with you guys. But it is a pleasure to be here. I also have Gladys Guerrero. I got to get my tongue rolling again. With me this weekend, she is with the Office of Volunteer Ministries, and she is also working on an initiative with Adventist Community Services for tutoring and mentoring. So we're glad to have her here with us today too, or for this weekend. So she'll be presenting throughout the weekend as well. But community services, this is our mission statement: serving communities in Christ's name. And what community services does is it mobilizes the gifts, the skills, the knowledge, the experience, the compassion, and the kindness of church members and others. It's not just us who get to do this, but people with a like mind to help the vulnerable in our communities. And it's a beautiful thing, because we actually mobilize the church to do this. And we can do that because these are just some of the people that I have personally met in ACS. These are some of the leaders and volunteers that ACS brings. So we're mobilizing some very interesting skill sets. We've got everyone from bankers, public works directors, students, social workers, doctors and nurses, maintenance workers, cooks, plumbers. I can think of school bus drivers, people working in the sawmill. But everybody comes together around this one aspect of our Christian life. ACS is people from I got kind of excited, because when I think about ACS people, I think, oh, and then they're this too. So 5 to 98 years old. You can do this at any age. We have Christians who work in ACS, agnostics, homeless, formerly homeless, court-mandated volunteers, retired, non-retired, immigrants. Current ACS clients serve as well as receive the services. So it's a beautiful family and a beautiful fellowship. It can be everything from food pantries. This is just a list of some of the ACS programs that are happening right now across the division. Shower trailers, gardens, dental clinics, medical clinics, conservation work, thrift stores, job fairs, exercise classes for older adults, back to school supplies, so much variety. because we meet the needs of people where they are. We have people, because we talk, I've been talking a lot about us, who we are as volunteers, what we do, but we also want to remember to center the people that we serve. So we want to remember that ACS is also people living in poverty. They're living unsheltered. They're survivors of disasters. They're returning from prison. Some have a diagnosis that they are dealing with and struggling with. A lot of foster children, people without utilities, immigrants, refugees. Anybody who is vulnerable is who we are there to stand in that gap with. The North American Division, in case you are not familiar with it, that the white areas of this map is the North American Division. So you are part of that area. It's Bermuda, Canada, Guam, Micronesia, and the United States. So ACS values. We're going to start with just the values that we build our service on. So this is what gives us our posture to serve from. Our posture is how we stand when we're interacting with other people. So we want to have a good posture. Good posture, we all know, affects our whole well-being. So a good posture in service is going to affect how we serve. So sharing the love of God through service, that is a key component to ACS. It's difficult to say that we love somebody, because we know as a church we're supposed to love, but it's difficult to say we love people if we are willing to see them suffer and not do anything about it. If we will walk by them and say, it's from their own bad decisions, but to have that compassion coming out of us. So we want to share the love of God. We also are connecting people with each other. Service connects people. That's where we find strength and resilience. In humility, we put our differences aside, and we serve because another person standing there in need. We're no different, we're no better, we're no worse. Serving actually rehumanizes people. And that's a really powerful place to be, both for them and for us. Discipleship, service as Christian life. We want to remember that we are discipling ourselves and discipling other people when we serve. This is who we are. So if we do not engage in service and acts of compassion, then I believe we are atrophying as Christians. We must extend that opportunity to others so that they can also feel that growth. The Bible says that when we serve the least of these, we're serving Jesus himself. So when we serve Jesus, we cannot help but be changed. So in discipleship, we need that relationship with him. And then services, we value in ACS holistic service. So we're looking at the whole person. People's lives are very complex. They're very interconnected. So to be effective, we must recognize that a single-prong approach will not likely be enough for people. They have a whole, problems come in bunches. So we need to look at the person holistically and look at their lives holistically and serve that whole situation them. So just looking at what's happening in our community, and some of them I broke down tomorrow afternoon, some specific to New Mexico and Albuquerque, but these are just some of the things to get just a sense. There's so much need happening. But here's just some statistics on foster children. 60% of girls rescued from sex trafficking have experienced foster care. So we start to see some of the where things are, where people are starting and becoming vulnerable from. 75% of incarcerated people have experienced foster care. 50% of homeless have aged out of foster care. So they've aged out and they haven't been given the skills, the life skills to launch their lives, their adult lives. Households facing hunger, 69% of people have to choose between food and utilities. 57% have to choose between food and housing. 66 had to choose between food and medical care. So people are making some hard choices in our communities. And some of those are in our church as well. Some of us have to make some of these choices. In 2022, homelessness increased by 6%. 6% of homeless people are veterans, 5% are unaccompanied youth under 25. That's a big shift. And in the Western Washington, where I was a little more on the ground with some of these issues, a lot of them were senior citizens. As their property taxes went up, they could no longer afford their homes, so one of the fastest growing homeless populations was senior citizens. And I think that and the youth were probably kids who are being raised by grandparents, who then went into assisted living, could no longer keep them, and then they end up on the street. So there's a lot of pain out there. 12% of youth aged 16 to 24 are living disconnected. That means that they are neither working or in school. So they're just out there. 49% of Americans named affordable housing as a major problem. And I think we all have experienced this. I think we understand this intuitively, and it's a major driver of homelessness as well. New Mexico, I did try to get something home. You actually need to work 55 hours per week at minimum wage to be able to afford a one-bedroom rental home. So people are making very difficult choices. So this is from a blog that was written in 2005. So it's been a little bit, but it really gives a sense, because if you reach out for help, we want to remember what people experience. So it's not just us giving help, but we need to be able to put ourselves in other people's shoes to say, what is it like to come here and ask for help? And how does our help, how is it being received? This has a lot to do with how we structure our help, how we organize, what policies we have. Do people have to fill out forms? What do they need to do to receive help? And how do we greet them, and how do we receive them? So to do that, we're going to listen to a couple voices here from a blog. He wrote about his experience, John Scalzi, he wrote about his experience of poverty and being poor and what that meant to him in his life. And then the comments, there's thousands and thousands of comments of people saying what it meant to them when they experienced poverty. What did it look like for them? So the first one says, being poor means having your life gone over with a fine-tooth comb to see if you're bad enough to help. So I think on our side, we're often thinking we don't want to waste service. We want to make sure the resources go to the right place. This is the flip side of that coin, saying you have to just go over every nitty-gritty and expose everything about your life to receive help and see if it's bad enough. Being poor is people surprised to discover that you're not actually lazy. Being poor is getting tired of people wanting you to be grateful. I can think of a lot of stories that we tell of people with a little tear after we give them their food. We kind of idolize this gratefulness as validating ourselves. Do they need to be grateful for us to feel validated? How do we need to measure what we're doing and how it's being received? Do they need to be grateful? Being poor is hoping that the toothache goes away. And if you've ever had a toothache, you know they don't really go away. They don't go away. Being poor is crying when you drop the macaroni and cheese on the floor. Being poor is deciding that it's all right to base a relationship on shelter. Is that how you would judge that? Being poor is knowing that no matter how hard and how much you work, you still can't cover it all. Being poor is knowing how hard it is to stop being poor, and being poor is running in place. So these are just a few. Some of them will break your heart. They're all difficult to read. This is what people's lives are like when they're living in poverty. And some of the rhetoric and the stereotypes around that may not be as accurate as what their actual lives are living. So we want to talk tonight about changing this narrative. And that centers around holistic ministry. When we serve people, there's a lot of labels, there's a lot of judgments that come with poverty. And so when we serve in a holistic way, we're trying to break down those stereotypes, at least in our own minds, and break down the judgments to rehumanize people. They are often dehumanized, and that is just not, as Christians, we need to put aside some of the rhetoric we hear in the news and in the media and come back and focus on Christ and seeing people as children of God again. The holistic service peels back those stereotypes, and we just get to see each other person to person. So we're going to look at holistic service tonight, what that is and some of the different aspects of it. Holistic service ministers to the whole person, so we need to recognize that it's not just a stomach that needs to be fed, or the physical side, the mental side, the social side, the spiritual and the emotional. Anytime we're ministering to people, we need to see all of those aspects. We may not be able to address every single one every time, but we need to build in as much as we can to say, if I am handing somebody a box of food, am I able to give them encouragement, emotional and mental encouragement? Is there somebody on site who can offer prayer and lift them up spiritually too? So we can start to embed some other aspects when we recognize that there's a whole person in front of us, and it's not just about the numbers of people we serve that we can check off and turn in our report, but we need to think through how we speak to people that can start to merge them back into one person. Think about what vocabulary you use to address them and to talk about your clients. Are they clients? Are they customers? Are they how do you address them, and how do you speak to them? And remember that you should always speak about people the same when they're not in the room as if they were in the room. Always speak about them, because that attitude will come through when they are in the room with you. So you want to speak about them very intentionally and keep that front in your mind. What phrases uplift and which ones, even unintentionally, do not. We need to become very intentional in how we speak about people. Are you on the lookout when they come and when you're interacting them, even coming to your church? Are you on the lookout for people in distress? What are the signs of distress? Is it a safe place where people can share? Where people can share what else is happening in their lives and just receive some support? Does your staff know, and I actually probably should know more about what it is you do here, but when people come, does everybody know how to pray with somebody in need? Could you assign a chaplain, an ACS chaplain, to be on hand during service times? Research shows that our ability to cope and pull through to a better place when things are falling apart in our lives, our ability to cope has less to do with our personal strength and more to do with our social networks. So just that ministry of being together in fellowship is a powerful, powerful piece that you have to offer. A place to belong creates resilience. It's a very, very heartening place. So there's times where you may not be doing a lot to meet that physical need. You're doing something, but you're very likely not going to be able to keep people housed and utilities on and fed, but you can do something, and along with that, you're knitting other people around them, and that gives them resilience. In a flooding situation that took place in our conference, we had volunteers go out to a house, and a lot of the people around them, around this one woman, had received help, but she was a little bit off the road, so she hadn't received any help. And her son was coming over after work trying to just gut the house. I mean, it was totally destroyed, huge amount of work. So the ACS volunteers that showed up were the first people to help her. And when they met her, she couldn't even look up and see them. She was looking at the ground. They just kept muttering, her and her son, I can't believe there's people who do this, who would come and help. About a year later, there was another kind of mission trip in the area, so they assigned that same volunteers to that same house. They were still working on her house. Other groups had since been looped in and brought to help rebuild her house. And when they saw her, she came flying out of the house, a completely different person. In the meantime, she was telling them she had been evacuated again. While she was evacuated, people had broken into her house to steal the pipes, and they hadn't turned off the water, of course, because they don't care. So there was water damage they had to redo, but her countenance was completely different because she knew there were people there to help her. So she went from being just devastated to being able to walk through this because there were people to walk through with her. So this ministry of ACS, all of your community ministries, allow you to mingle with those who are discouraged, to mingle with those who are suffering, with those who are in pain, and not just the physical pain, but the emotional and spiritual pain, so you can encourage them, and that's an incredible ministry. So this is a tool for being able to do even more if you think about it holistically. Another way to think of holistic ministry is through the relationships that we all need. So there's 4 basic relationships in our lives that need reconciliation. We all have broken relationships, and one of those is to God. So it is important to be healthy that people need a right relationship with God to understand His love and His grace and His purpose for them. So poverty of spiritual intimacy, there's actually a poverty of intimacy with God, and to reconnect people. And if they don't have that, they can be turning to the false gods in their lives, which might be addiction or materialism. So this isn't just people living without money. We all can have this poverty. There's also the relationship to yourself, because people are created, each of you are created in the image of God. So they all have dignity and value. So without that perspective of who we are, many go down the path of self-harm. So poverty of being, and if you are living in poverty of who you are, not understanding that, a person might have low self-esteem, or they might have a little bit of a God complex, to think they are everything. We need to understand who we are in balance. And then the relationship with others in our community. We are built to be community-minded and to live in fellowship, and that often gets breached. And I think one example of that is people who are incarcerated. We often talk about a lot of people are living in addiction. They kind of burn their bridges, and they can be left outside of their community. So we need to be cognizant of how to heal them and bring that relationship back. Not always with the exact individuals, because there may have been some abuse, there may be reasons why there's distance, but to bring them into a fellowship with other humans, which is where it's just poverty of community leads to self-centeredness, because they think they're it, or it can lead to exploitation, where they are so vulnerable and alone that they can be taken advantage of. So connecting those and healing those relationships is a part of holistic ministry. And then the final one is the relationship to the environment. And this is our cultural environment, kind of the society that we live in, that there's like an ecosystem that we live in, and poverty of stewardship of what that looks like, or if our culture is not healthy, if there's discriminatory practices, if there's things happening that isolate some people and make them kind of disenfranchise some people while other ones have access to more resources. We want to make sure that it's a fair and equitable society. And if that's around stewardship, and so if there's poverty of stewardship, people can lose their purpose. If they can't connect with what's happening around them, they can give up. They might stop caring, or they might become workaholics and materialistic because they do have it. So when these relationships are healed, you start to get very balanced, wholesome people. So it's for us as well as for the people that we serve. So we want to make sure that we are whole and that we're creating spaces where people can become whole when we serve. And holistic service is also about approaching the need or the problem with the right tools to dismantle that problem. So we're not trying to just sustain people within their challenges. We want them to move from not having enough to eat to being able to be independent and being able to sustain their own families. So there's 4 strategies for doing this. So it's often it can sound or look a little technical when we get into it, but if you have the right strategy for the situation, and if you understand them, you'll start to understand how to approach what you're trying to accomplish. What do you want to do, and what results do you want from it? So the first one is relief. And relief work is about immediate suffering requiring immediate help. If somebody's house has just burned down, they need you to step in and give them food and clothes and shelter. This strategy offers aid and relief to an urgent need. So you use it when there's a crisis. This is short term, a temporary fix to help people through that immediate need. It can bring quick results. If I go downtown and hand somebody who's living unsheltered a meal and they eat it, they are given immediate relief. But how long does it last? About 4 hours, unless you're really hungry. Depending what you put in the meal, it might be less, but yeah, right around 4 hours. So you need to do it because we need to sustain life, but know what your results are going to be and have realistic expectations. Continuing to offer short-term help in response to long-term needs outside of a crisis, the individuals can get caught up into that problem, and you're sustaining them within it. So just doing that is not going to move them to a more holistic place. So yes, some of the examples: providing food and shelter, maybe emotional support. Disaster response is an excellent place to use relief because you just need to help people. You might be opening a warming shelter or offering meals to people living unsheltered, a food pantry, distributing food to the hungry, some of those types of stuff. If you have heard the old adage of give a man a fish and he eats for a day, this is giving a man a fish. And it's sometimes that adage is used to say like it's useless. It's not useless in its place. It's very, very useful. People do need to eat, but typically we encourage that to be used seldom and temporarily until you can move them to a better place. The next one is renewing individuals. So when you start to see chronic problems, somebody comes for help and they're probably going to be in that situation next year unless something changes. That is a chronic problem. So renewing individuals, those ministries change a person's long-term circumstances by helping them to improve their physical, mental, emotional, intellectual, or relational status. As those other pieces start to heal, then they can start to have the personal capacity to step out of their situation. So examples of these usually are around support systems or classes. So maybe financial literacy, job search skills, English language learning, financial education, addiction recovery. So these take longer. You notice on the results, it takes months to years to see results because we change slowly, don't we? We all, takes us a bit to learn new ways to do things and new ways to think. So we need to give people that time as well to learn a new skill or learn a new way of thinking. So it takes longer, but the change is also more long-lasting. If you've received a certificate that will secure you a better job, you can move. It's going to be a longer-lasting piece. So this is teach a person to fish. We gave a person a fish. Now we're going to teach them how to fish. But then we go to the next one, and we hear the Reverend Desmond Tutu. He said, we need to stop pulling people out of the river. That's what those two earlier ones are, is you're finding people drowning in the river, you're pulling them out. We need to stop pulling people out of the river, or just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they are falling in. What is going on, and can we do something that keeps them from falling in the first place? So this is where we get into revitalizing communities. This is also for chronic community-wide problems. So you think of some of those issues that I shared earlier with homelessness or some of the issues, those are community-wide. This is not just one household experiencing this. So something's going on in the community. It can take years or longer, but it adds resources to the overall community. And it's kind of funny, sometimes our work overseas gives us more perspective if you think about putting in a well in a small village in a developing country, that we understand that we need that well to help them, give them the resources that they can all access. So we're looking at what is in our communities, what makes a healthy community here in Albuquerque, and are there any key components that are missing? It could be financial institutions. There's usually some neighborhoods that do not have access to a financial institution, a bank. Do they have good schools? Do they have the same quality of school in this neighborhood, in this community, as is in this community? It can be a grocery store. It can be public transportation. Is there affordable medical care accessible to everybody in the community? So this is a space where a church or multiple churches can come together and offer something to that community and start to make the community itself a better place to live, where everybody can go. They don't have to ride on a bus for an hour to get their 2 bags of groceries for $100 because it's really expensive to buy groceries. So there's less need of help when people have the tools at hand to manage their own lives. It's right there within reach. They can grow more independent and grow in their well-being, and they can start to work together as a community, because we all like to be part of that community. So you want people to feel like they are contributing, and you want them to contribute because they are able to. So thrift stores can add affordable clothing and goods, and the store can also be a source of jobs. Community gardens, so these are some ACS programs in other places. I'm giving you actual examples of things people are doing. Community gardens can grow fresh produce, or you can open a small grocery store. Low-cost legal clinics will give people access to affordable legal help. Curb-to-curb transportation for medical appointments or grocery shopping for people who have limited mobility and may not be able to drive. So some of these pieces that allow them to start functioning better. It often doesn't take much to get people unstuck from where they are. So we start to ask, we knew that we gave a man a fish, we taught him how to fish, and now we're asking, is there a pond in the neighborhood? Is there somewhere for them to get the fish that they know how to fish for? Do they have a fishing pole? Sometimes we judge by what we have access to and not what they have access to. So really looking at the community. So this means, and I believe, Pastor Leonard, you've talked about assessing your community and getting out and getting to know your community. This is how you know what you can do. You're going to learn about them, discover what's happening, and then you can start to say, okay, which piece do we feel like we can address, and what do we need to use to address it with? And the final one is rallying for change. Using your voice on behalf of others and inviting them to do the same. So what policies or processes are restricting people from thriving. And you can organize your network to understand this and to take action. So this usually takes partnerships, because the more people speaking, the more attention it gets. So there may be unfair political, economic, environmental practices, cultural institutions that need to be changed. And we know we live in a fallen world, so we know they're there. We know they're there. So we just need to say, what does this look like? So this is a ministry of advocacy. Proverbs 31, verses 8 to 9 says to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute, speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. So this is a very long-term approach. Policy change can come very hard. Attitudes can come hard. These are chronic systemic problems, so it can take a long time, but it can be extremely effective when you open up and take down the barriers to success. I can tell you a story of one pastor who joined a fellowship of pastors in his community, and they identified a school that was run down, poor supplies, just the building itself was crumbling, much less the supplies that the kids had to learn with. So they visited the city council, they visited the school board meetings. For a year, those pastors showed up and said, we're really concerned about this school, and we really feel like something needs to be done. And after a year, they allocated the money to rebuild that school. So your voice has power. And I don't know that we remember that always. We're used to, we've grown a little cynical in thinking that we can't change things, they're the way they are. But having good, caring people stand up and say, this isn't right, it can change things. So be bold. We're asking, we had the man got a fish, he's learned how to fish, there's a pond now, he's got his fishing pole, he's ready to fish, but is there a fence around the pond? And are they restricted to fish from the pond with no fish? Are there fish in that pond? They have the school, but is it a school where the children can thrive and learn? So it's those types of issues that we're looking at. And then I want to talk to you a little bit as we go towards the end of this, of doing with versus doing for people. You'll notice at the beginning that I talked about who ACS is in some of the clients. It's people who are hungry, it's people who are living unsheltered, but they do bring value to their own lives. They are not helpless. They have something to offer. So we want to make sure that holistic ministry includes everybody in our community to making that community better. We are not their saviors. Everybody has a role to play, and even the people that we're helping want to be helpful. Because remember, helping other people strengthens us. So we want to make sure that they have that opportunity to give as they're able to do. So when we look at how to help, and this is called asset-based community development is what this is from. Often a church will approach a community and say, what are the needs? What is lacking? And it's good to back up. I mean, you do need to identify those needs, but back up for a minute at the beginning to say, what is right in this community? There are good things happening in every community. What are some of the things that is, the resilience that's available in our communities is amazing, and people have skills. They love their children, they take care of their children, they cook, they do all sorts of things. So we don't want to just see them as a problem. We want to step back and make sure that our posture and how we serve them recognizes not just their intrinsic value as a child of God, but the value that they bring with their own mind and their own skills. When we don't do that, we're focusing on what is wrong. It damages our perception of people, and it damages our perception of the communities, and it undermines their perceptions of themselves. So when we ask what is right, ooh, there we go. So asset-based community development has been described as you have a glass of water here that's filled midway. And where do you look first? So they're asking you to look at the water first and say, this glass is half full, and look at all the good things in there, and what is in that water. What is that water supply? And then you can see that there's an empty section too. And what is that? Where are the gaps in there? But it's a subtle shift, but it's a very powerful shift. Because this question affirms people's dignity. It affirms how they can contribute to the process of themselves overcoming poverty, because most people want to do better. It's just taking them there. So you want to identify and uplift the capabilities, skills, and resources of the individual or the community. And this will also help you not duplicate things. You want to connect with existing resources. And this again goes back to the community assessment. What is already there? How can we connect in with that and create a more whole system for people? And only bring in outside resources when local resources are insufficient to solve pressing needs. So if there is enough food, you do not need the food bank. If there's something already happening, you don't want to undermine that in people. If you think about the prophet Elisha, when the widow came to him and said her sons, she was in debt, her husband had died, and her sons were about to be taken to pay the debt. And what did Elisha say? He wanted something. He said, and he asked her questions, didn't he? He started with questions. What do you have in your house? What do you already have? So what did she have? Just a little bit. Just a little bit. It wasn't enough to solve her problem, but she had something. So once he recognized what she already had, and then who did he send her to? Her whole community. The resources were in the community, so he didn't say, I will solve your problem and you will glorify God because the man of God solved your problems. He sent her and he reconnected her with herself and her ability to solve her problems. He reconnected her with her community. So he's pulling all, it's just a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story. So, and then through that, God was able to bring in the rest that was missing and that power to fill all the jars. And he made it in a way that she would be able to long-term, we could go into that too, long-term he gave her an asset that she could then manage her own life. Because she had probably never lived on her own. Yes, yes. They see just the problem too. We all just see the problem. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? But to focus back and say, what is there? And what do you have? And how can we leverage that to solve your larger issue? Because you look at her life as a widow, or as a woman, she probably had never managed her household finances. But this, how he handled it, affirmed her ability to do that and to make decisions for her household moving forward and the ability to take care of her people, her sons. So holistic service, it includes the gifts and the skills of people for the benefit of themselves and their neighbors. Because we all like to help people, so they can help their neighbors too. Holistic service does not do for people what they can do for themselves. And holistic service limits relief work to emergency situations. And I would expand that to say you can do relief work, but do it in the context of other work too. So if there's feeding, if you're taking food to an apartment complex that's low income, use that to get to know people and say, okay, what is happening here and what else can we bring into this situation? Don't use it just to keep doing it. Holistic service listens closely to those it seeks to help, especially to what is not being said. Many feel they cannot be honest with us, and I think we saw that in the comments on the blog about what poverty meant to people, that they are trying to be grateful, they're trying to be the right person so they will get service, so they may not feel like they can be transparent with us. So we need to learn to be discerning and to hear them completely. And this is quite the quote from Bob Lupton. He is an urban ministries worker. He's quite active in community development, and he says we cannot serve others out of poverty. So he's going back to those relationships and the community development. You can't just keep giving somebody something and expect them to actually leave poverty, but they need to be that holistic attitude of ours to get them what they need to do. And then I think we have a little bit of time for questions and just a little bit of discussion or dialogue or what your thoughts were. Can you tell me what you guys do here? What kinds of things you do?
We're trying to get a food bank started.
Okay. Yeah.
We were sitting at the restaurant eating, and one person said to the other, I think it's cheaper with about an RV or something to live in than to pay rent, because the rent is so expensive, so they can't do anything.
Yeah, I could see an RV. You need a place to park it. There's some other, but there's certainly, people are looking for alternatives to the housing situation. There's a lot.
Something that came to mind as you were talking about the Bible story, in that oftentimes we approach people in a way that restricts the possibility of what can happen in the way we approach, and also it might even, you said that it restricts what we can do, and then what they are able to do. In a way, it might even put a picture in their mind that we are a certain way.
Yes.
That, you know,
Yes.
And as you were talking about the story, I thought about, you know, how the oil, being able to collect the jars and produce, you know, God-produced oil also brought them validation. It gave them value. They were able to have value in that process to say, we have something to contribute. Yes. So, I mean, yeah, so it's something I thought. I sent you a video.
A lot in there. Did you? Because it's when you look at him, he also asked her, what do you need? Because he could have looked at her situation and said, you know what you need is a husband. Or you need to get a garden going so you can feed your family, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. When you're outside the situation, you can't make those decisions. You have to start where people are ready to start, and that in her mind was the most pressing need. And it was a valid one, but we need to listen to people first, so we're starting where they're motivated to take action. They're not going to do what I think needs to be their first priority. We need to hear them, so Elisha did that. He said, what do you need? It validated her decision-making process. And then you notice when she went to pour the oil, she took her sons with her. Can you imagine the witness that was for her sons? To be part of it, to be part of their own salvation from that situation, because they were at stake too. So to bring the people who are involved in it and help them to help themselves. And again, only bring what they can't do to just take it over. So it's not as quick, it's not as easy, but it's much, much more effective. And it can be done even within a food bank. It's just how you structure the program to think, how can people do this a little bit different to be able to incorporate some of these principles.
Oh, thank you for coming.
Yes.
There's something you said really important. I'm studying with 3 people. The one I study normally on Friday nights, their house were burned. And this is newly people that I'm studying with, that me and my wife are studying with. By the 3rd study, they called us and they told us the house was burned.
Oh, man.
And I told them, I said, I have an RV, and I told them you should, you could come and grab the RV. So, but I noticed after that, they broke in anyways because they didn't want it. They didn't want to bother us. I don't know, because we were barely new. We were getting to know each other. But after the incident, they were so close to us because they said, well, we didn't expect you to just come and grab the RV, and we barely know each other. And I think you were talking about the holistic, when we think about Bible study, we think about only the 28 fundamental beliefs, or for them to get to know us, we rush, but we've been building a relationship with them that it takes us beyond that. So they ended up breaking up in their house because the house was burned. Behind the house, like I guess if you will go to the house through the front, you couldn't see that the house was burned or damaged, but the back of the house was burned, and the ceiling was damaged completely, and they had to stay in a hotel. The insurance paid for it, and my wife called them and said, "Do you need any food? Do you need?" And like I said, it changed the dynamic. And then the study that we have on Saturdays at 2, we've been helping her with her struggles, and sometimes I put aside the Bible study and we address that. I think it's very important that we should, because there's a lot of people that are going through a lot. Me, myself, when I came back to church when I was 28, I came back to church, but I did a lot of drug addiction, and I needed somebody to speak with. I remember that first day when I went to down the water of the baptism, I didn't want to go home because I felt like I was among angels. So it is very important to get to know their needs.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you addressed that.
Good. No, it is, you bring it up very well, not to have your own agenda. Well, this is the Bible study we were supposed to do, and we're going to do my agenda, but to follow where people are at and what's happening in the reality of their life, but to be cognizant of all of those needs, that they're a whole person. So we're dealing with this, and it could be different pieces of the church that I do well with this piece, but to have another ministry that I can loop in and to network with each other in different aspects of what you're doing, to be able to bring more pieces to their lives.
You've given us so much information that it would be nice that when you leave, you leave what do they call that? You have a guidelines. This is how you run a Del Taco. This is how you run a Long John Silver.
A little quick start guide.
This is how you do this. And because you slept since then, so we just revert back to the old way of thinking. So you've given us so many ways to look at things, and so it would be nice if you gave them an instruction book about how to handle it. So when you're gone, So this is our rule book,
Will
and this is
follow
how we
me.
do this.
You've got the ACS director.
Yeah.
Part of it, I think what you've gone through with the needs assessment, you are constantly, in a really nutshell, you are constantly in a process of discovering your community. You're never done with that, because communities change, you change, systems change, you know, the environment around us changes, and you're gonna go deeper and deeper. So getting to know people, getting to know what's around you, and then starting to tap into that system. And then you're just gonna keep going around and evaluating what you're doing. Part of what you're gonna see, do you see the same people next year? I've had an ACS leader quite proudly tell me that now it was for a children's program, and now we're serving, giving clothes to the next generation. Like, if we want to help people, what does help look like? What does it mean for them? Is it that we can say we gave out this many pounds of food, and this, we track that type of information so we can see what's happening? Because sometimes it tells us, we've received reports at the conference that were called and said, you know, you did like twice as much food this year as you did last year. And he's like, is that why we're so tired? Because the needs change, so it helps you understand what's happening. You track that stuff, but you need to track more than just, this is what we did, so we were successful. It's more than just those outcomes of the basic statistics. You've got to look deeper into the impact you're having in your community and what changes are happening. And you're right, we have a very deep rut we're trying to get out of. So we need to be very intentional and take your time to just move yourself somewhere to where it is. And it can be as easy as just rethinking, this is how we did this ministry. How else could we do it that just changes that? You know, if I've heard of, I'll give actual examples of what people have done, a food pantry, and they changed it to a food co-op. And so there are people in our communities who cannot work. So they paid about $5 a month. They would bring the truck, everybody helped unload, they all helped, they laid out the banana boxes, everybody helped to pack the boxes. They had a community meeting. This is somebody this is a group working in a community. They embed themselves in that community so they know who's who, and then they can have a little meeting. They'd put them into groups, they'd have a meeting, they might have a devotional, they might just talk about what's happening. There's a bus stop that they're trying to redirect, and do we need that bus in this community, so they could advocate for themselves. So it could be something simple like that, a shelter where you at least make your own bed, do some of doing what they can do and not undermining those abilities in people. So it's just being creative, and we don't see it that much. It's a new way of thinking, so you're right, it's easy to fall back into what you know. But there's books like Toxic Charity and When Helping Hurts that go much deeper into this.
It sounds like you have at least a 15-page manual.
Ah, look at you. Community Services has some like a quick start guide that covers some of this.
When I present my the seminar about assessing communities, we do talk about things that we can do as a church to find those needs and to try to find those gaps as a church, and to see the needs that we, or at least we talk assessment, we talk about what we can do, what our strength is as a church, and then we would try to find a gap, a hole in the community where we can actually come in and do something that is meaningful to the community. And it's a creative process. It just doesn't happen all the same way, but there is some instruction how to do that. But it has to be, you have to get out and
do it.
Do it, right.
Yes. I think that's one of our habits, is that we want, and not that this is what you're asking for, but in the church we like that in a box. We want a ministry in a box. We want the formula. If I do this and this, then this will happen. And the mind shift, which I think Pastor Leonard is referring to, is that it's much more creative, and it's not laid out. The process is actually the ministry. You're meeting people in the community. You're sitting down with the mayor. You're sitting down with your local council member saying, look, we don't have all the answers, but we want to be part of something.
Right.
And we just want to get to know our community. What do you see happening? What is concerning to you? And they'll share that, and they're looking for churches to be part of part of these issues. They need the churches. They want the churches. Anytime I've gone, they have almost said, where were you? Where have you all been? Where have you all been? Because everybody knows, I think it's a fairly understood that Christians should be helping and loving people. So they're looking for, where are you? We've had a sheriff ask one of our community service directors, our conference directors, in a meeting of faith-based groups. So I think they were all Christian faiths actually in this room. And he said, where are you? It's like, I can't build jails fast enough for these kids. Where are the churches? And it's like, ooh, ouch. So they did, they have an after-school program now for STEM learning. But they're looking for us, and they're watching that piece of our witness of how we respond to needs.
And I think the blueprint, Jesus gave us the blueprint. I mean, most of the miracles that Jesus did, he did them on Saturday. He was an idol. And I say this because as I was growing in Mexico, I remember my mom and my grandma would take us to church, and after church, we would eat on a rush, and then we would go out. And now that I came, and I'm not comparing, I mean, but typically, and I'm coming from a Hispanic church as well, I think we just need to go out there and observe what they're doing. Where's the need? We're not going to find the real need here, sitting here, Saturday afternoon or when about our days. Now, another thing that I read on the Desire of Ages is that John the Baptist, before he began his ministry, he will observe people before he began his ministry. For 30 years, I guess, he was just observing, reading, getting feedback, and how he was going to approach the people. And I think we need to, if they ask you how or when, just go up there, start walking, get glow tracks, give to people, and then if we see the need of food, next time we could just make some burrito sandwich and give it to them. But it has to begin from somewhere. We need to start.
You do need to start somewhere. And you'll probably do something wrong, so just accept that. Just be willing to learn. We're not going to go out and do something perfectly the first time we do it. That's not how life works. So give yourself grace to continue in the process. Just don't do it and feel like you need to justify what you did or you were wrong, but see it as that process where you're continually learning how to do this better. Now that we did this, what can we do? And build those into your program sometimes to sit back and say, what is happening and how can we do this a little different? Because there's always going to be something you can do different. But you're right, Sabbath is a good time to serve. Sabbath. This was very, very direct. Very direct. I don't want to split a church over it. I don't know what everyone's thoughts are here. but they are, he was very clear. He was kind of in your face about it. He didn't just do it. He looked and made sure the Pharisees were watching him. You see me? And then he turned and healed the withered hand. He was pretty direct. He was pretty direct, yes.
Something that we did when we were in Santa Fe is we would take Friday and Sabbath, we were serving the homeless veterans, and homeless people would come as well. It wouldn't have to be veterans, only veterans. But we would shut down the churches on Sabbath because that was our worship. That was what we were doing. We were serving God on Sabbath, and we had a worship service in during that time. But that, to try to get people to say, today we're not going to go to church, we're going to go out and serve, and that's going to be our worship to God. Some people are like, what? But
It challenges our norms a little bit, but I think what the church I was an elder at, we would go out, and it was very small, so we could do this without a lot of fighting. But we would go out in the morning for a couple hours, do something, and come back for potluck and have a little devotional and a debrief. So we still had some worship within it, like you say, but to experience God's love, experience sharing in a really tangible, practical way. It's a different way to worship, to be out there demonstrating. People see whatever we do, that's how they're going to see God. And so we need to make sure that we're thoughtful in how to do that. But he was pretty clear. Was there a question back there?
Any other questions?
Did you have a question?
Rodney?
I thought I saw your hand up. Okay, no. All right.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Just want to say that my nephew was a great example to us. He lived in Florida, and he would go to the poorest of the neighborhoods, and he would have barbecues and gather the people in the neighborhood and have barbecues. And he actually built a church there. And my niece would sometimes go with him sometimes into the neighborhood, and she would see these. She said to me one time, I was walking down a block, and she goes, "Oh my goodness, I don't want to die here. There's gangsters standing out at the fence there." And all of a sudden, those guys said, "Hey, Gabriel, how you doing today?" He made a connection with the people in the neighborhood, and he, like I said, like once a month he would have a barbecue for the whole neighborhood area, and he had a church started there just by doing what he was doing.
It rehumanized them, didn't it?
Yes.
It made them back into another human, not just those people that we need to be afraid of. And not to say we don't need to be discerning of where we go, but if you're comfortable in that situation, it's a very powerful thing. Bob Lupton was one of the quotes, and he wrote Toxic Charity, the book Toxic Charity, and his ministry goes into a neighborhood for a year before they do anything. And he plants a couple volunteers who live there for a year, getting to know people and just dwelling among people. But one of the things that he said that his group, because they do the whole community development. Once they start going, they're starting a business, they're redeveloping housing, making affordable housing. They said they don't go into a community where they're not invited. I thought, what if we as a church only put a church where we were invited? Because that's what it would look like. That's what it would look like. Instead, we're usually there trying to convince people to like us. But if they said, we need you, and what would we do different if that was our MO?
I can't help but think, I know I'm bringing it back up again, but it's when I came back around, I can't remember the year, I think it was around 1994, but I started to straighten up and fly right instead of, because I was always attracted to the other side, I guess, of certain people that had certain characteristics, but they weren't, well, when you make a decision about something and it doesn't fly right. So anyway, I was going to a wiener schnitzel in the morning on the maintenance, and they had a list that was kill Arnold Schwarzenegger that you're supposed to do every day.
Yes.
At 6 o'clock, and if you were there past 6 o'clock, they would dock you for 15 minutes, and you're supposed to do all this stuff. And hose down the parking lot, and wash all the windows, and yada, yada, yada. Rotate out. So anyway, but to get to the point was, and then I would sometimes go home and take a nap, and then I would work at a place called Long John Silver's. And I was a cook, and I can't remember what we were doing in the morning, but they had very structured ways of doing things, and it was the managers who read this supercharged down there, giving 1,000%, but when I drive down the street, like we got First Street over here where the Napa Auto Parts and the steel yards, but I feel, I haven't been there, he does it.
Yeah.
He ministers to the homeless, he gives out coat, but I feel right now, the pendulum kind of swings, what you're talking about, when I drive through there, I feel threatened, because I have tried to help out with several sets of homeless people.
Yeah, and in a very practical way to be, you don't want to put yourselves in danger, and that's not what we advocate. But if you have somebody who does understand what's happening, because it's a very different type of space and different norms, so you may not know how to interact with it. But if you have somebody, I would suggest going down with people. There's some issues you need to be together or in partnership with people. Some of the groups that'll go down into Seattle, they just make sure the police like to know where you're at. And not that they're gonna stop you, not that they're gonna guard you, but they like to know that something is happening, so they understand what's happening in the city. So being wise, you do need to be wise. Don't just, wise as serpents, gentle as doves.
Or I can see the church as a group, as a movement,
Yeah.
Not just one person.
Yeah, not one person taking, and we often do that, and it's a beautiful thing, but when you come around it as a body, you just have a different impact than one person down there doing it. When you're coming together in unity around an issue, you have a much different impact.
I just love the instructions. You read something and you learn
And do
and
it.
you know how to do things. And then I just like the part that, if you do something wrong, it's not the end, you just know not to approach it or do something different next time.
We don't always give ourselves grace, do we? And it often paralyzes us is the problem, because we think we have to have it all figured out before we can start. And that first step kind of clears a little bit of the fog so you can see the next step. You have to take the first step. And then you take that, if you think of a really dense fog and you've got to move, you're not going to see the end until you start to move. But do it at a pace that, don't tear off running through, that you come upon the cliff so fast you don't see it. Do what makes sense, and absolutely give yourself grace. Learn from our mistakes. It's what we expect everyone else to do, so we need to do it ourselves. So.
And I just wanted to share this, Matthew 15 and 21 and 25. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this Bible verse helped me, 15:24, to understand what our mission. It says, "But he answered and said, I was not sent except to the last sheep of the house of Israel." I always thought he was, I didn't look at it this way, but when I studied the Bible verse, in reality, the last sheep all around us is the last sheep of the house of three angels. We need to go get them. I think we need to go and serve them. And if you see here, she was a Gentile. She had a need. Her daughter was severely demon-possessed. And finally, Jesus answered and addressed the need. Because if you read the disciples, they want to send her away and not address why did they want to send her away. Because, like you said, it was just, this is what we're going to do. But Jesus was addressing the whole thing.
The whole person, yep.
Yes.
I'd like to add something. It made me think, actually, when you talking about the jobs and the list of things. We, as a church, we're not a business, but we are. If a business doesn't know what they're about, they'll run out of business. If we as a church do not understand what our business is on this earth, then we will run out of business. In other words, what is our business? Win souls for Christ. We're here to win souls. Now, when it comes to ACS, that process might take a long time. We oftentimes we think, okay, look, I helped them out. Here, take this. You need to learn about God. You know, sometimes we're too quick. And then also, this is one thing you made me think. You know, as a business, there's two things we're looking at as a church. We can teach people to serve. We can tell them, go do this, go do that. We can teach our own people to serve, but we cannot teach to have compassion. And if we're out there just doing, and not with the heart to do, then we will also fail in the business of winning people to Christ. It's just something to think about.
And when you think about winning people to Christ, if you rephrase that even to say, to introduce them to the love of God.
Right.
And you're able to do that, whatever the baptism rate or whatever else. And service has to do with yourself as well as a Christian. There's, you know, what's required of you to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly. So sometimes we need to remember that service is for our own discipleship. It's not just to help somebody else and always somebody else, but we need to be the people of God that we're called to be, and that includes the compassion that everybody's bringing up so eloquently. But when we demonstrate that and we embody that, the results will take care of themselves. The Holy Spirit will act on, but we need to be about our Father's business.
Right.
Yes, sir.
What was the analogy about the fence around the pond? I lost that. The fence around
The fence around the pond, so you,
the pond, there's a fishing pole, there's a pond, there's fish in the pond, and there's something to do, but I remember about the fence around.
Sometimes there's a fence around.
sometimes there's a fence. So we say, well, they have a pond, what's wrong with them?
There's a fence.
It had to do with advocating and looking at
Yeah.
policies that are in place. And I mean, you can go pretty deep on this. I think in one of our old manuals, we do have manuals, but one of the older ones had an example from an ACS center where people were coming in with their utility bills and needing help with this. So they're doing relief work, but they're keeping their eyes and their ears open to what is happening in these people's lives. Eventually, they uncovered a whole piece of corruption within the utility system for price gouging for these people. So when we're working, so that's the fence of looking at the larger systems that are in place and advocating for them to say, we're sending money and resources to this school, but not this school. What's wrong with these kids? Why can't these kids have a good school? And looking at, so we say, oh, they have a school, they have the same ability to learn and grow as the rest of us, but do they really? So it can look like there's, like it's the end of it. We have a tendency, kind of in Western culture, to blame individuals. But we need to open our mind to see what else is happening that might be extra barriers that I don't have to deal with that they need to deal with. So are there fish in the pond? Is there a fence around the pond? We feel like we've done our duty for this community, but have we? Is it really accessible for them? People in banking, people save more if they have a bank account. But most of the materials written in a bank, they're very intimidating spaces to walk into a bank if you don't know anything about it. And the materials are written at a pretty high level of reading. So is it accessible to people? If they're not literate, and Gladys will pull you into that one, if they're not literate, can they access? There was somebody, I don't want to steal her thunder on literacy, but there was a speaker I heard last year. She was sharing about her program. She was an attorney, but she was realizing that a large percent of the people she was representing learned to read in prison. And so that means that they went through the legal process, the criminal, they were persecuted, and they couldn't even read the charges against them. So is it really, are there some of those invisible barriers that we don't think of that they're not able to access what they need? Mm-hmm.
So, I guess, I know there's a big percentage, I didn't see it up there on your screen when you showed the
There's so much, yeah.
but how do you present something to somebody that's incapable? I mean, some are capable,
Mm-hmm.
but they have to take their pills in order to, to be present.
Yeah.
And they don't want to take these pills because it makes them feel bad, But then there's others that, say veterans, they have PTSD, and
Yeah.
they just don't even know how to really take care of themselves. How do you present yourself to them?
Those are a lot of issues wrapped up because everybody, yeah, it's like, woo, you hit the mental health issues. The simplest level of that,
Love.
do you have an answer? Oh, I thought maybe he had the answer. He was going to solve all our problems with the mic. But one of the simplest low-level things is that we have an epidemic right now from loneliness.
Yeah.
And a church combats loneliness just by existing. You are brought into fellowship. So not necessarily, I'm not saying, go baptize people, but to create a place where people can belong and to meet them where they are and to fellowship with people. And it can be, sometimes, people, and again, a church can be an intimidating place to walk into too. So going out, have a song fest in the park and just invite people, whatever it is. So that's a very low level, easy, catch them before. The suicide rates are insane. They're insane, and this is just from desperation and loneliness. There's also partnerships was the other thing you made me think of. I don't know if you had something else. You need to work with other people. You're not going to cure schizophrenia here. Or PTSD, severe PTSD, but to have the compassion to say, this is your best today. This is the best you have, so we are going to keep you going. So that's where sometimes relief just comes in because that's all that they can take. And to wait. Well, you can look for opportunities. I knew not an Adventist agency, but they walked the streets of Seattle every day, just greeting people and saying, hey, we're down here if you need anything. It could take them years before somebody came enough out of the fog to build enough trust. A lot of those people have huge trust issues. There's a lot of abuse. We don't know what they've experienced. We had a gal at a ACS center who was living unsheltered. So she was at the shelter and she was volunteering. She would get help, but she was also volunteering. She did quite a bit, and they ended up just giving her a key and saying, if you wake up early and it's cold out, just come, and they put a little microwave. But they knew her. See, they're working within a relationship, so they know her. But then the shelter made a new policy where they had to sign a contract, and that was too much for her. She went back to her tent. And so we don't know what people have experienced and where the trauma is. So learning about trauma, learning to understand the reactions to trauma is going to help us understand where people are and meet them somewhere where we can do something appropriate. And she's back. I think she's still living in her tent, but she at least comes back. She was turning in her key when I was visiting, and they were all a little heartbroken. And they still don't know what her story is. She's never gotten to that level of trust, but they're good friends. And people just need that safety. So we meet them where they're at, and sometimes it's a long ways. But if that's all they can handle, it's again doing, not doing what they can do for themselves, but if that's all they can do then that's where we're at. A lot of compassion. It's frustrating work. Yeah.
It kind of goes back to what Rodney said about the barbecue. That created community. It allowed people to come into a space without being judged. And so people, the gangsters were not, they were not like, you know, what you doing here? You know, their guard was down, and they were able to open up and actually beat, like she said, beat people. And I think that when it comes to people in need, you know, PTSD, all these, well, yeah, I mean, we're not mental health professionals, but we are people. And I think that if people can see that we care, that is something that they will value as well. I mean, we can give what we can give, but you do have to be careful.
Yeah, you need to be wise.
You need to be wise.
And not overstep boundaries to think that
2
you're
minutes
going
on
to
the
get
live stream.
something in there.
All right.
You don't want to step into the place where a qualified professional is really necessary. So the more you learn, the more you'll understand where your boundaries are. Keep good boundaries. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say that when we meet a person like he mentioned, or any person, we always have to make them feel special. Because I had a sister-in-law, she died last year in March, and she would always tell me, you know what, Gloria, you're special and you're valuable, and God loves you. And if we start off, you know, talking to a person that way, and you start to know them, you don't just stop right there. You continue to show them that they're special and, you know, valuable. And she taught me a good lesson on that, because I would talk to people and tell them, oh, you're so nice, or say something, you know, but I didn't think it was important to continue the relationship with her. And because I had a relationship with God, I was able to talk to her, you know, but
Fabulous.
I think it's important that we do have to do that, you know.
It sounds so simple, but what a impact it has to bring, because you're really addressing their relationship to themselves and reminding them of who they are, because if they don't understand that, they do a lot of self-harm. They do a lot of self-harm. There's a lot of people, and a lot of people among us. So, yeah, we all have done things because we didn't understand ourselves. So just reminding them, this is who you are, and I see you, and I value that, is really powerful. Such a simple thing, such a simple thing.
You know, I think we've learned a lot tonight, and there's so much more to learn. I mean, like the books that she's mentioned, there's so much to read and to learn. I think that we can benefit from that. Now, we're going to go ahead and close tonight, but remember, if you want to learn more, come tomorrow. I see a great group here. Come tomorrow morning. We're having Sabbath school. Just know this. If you want to be here on time, be here on time, because we're going to start. We're supposed to be here at 9:45, but we're going to start the program or the talk at 10 o'clock on point, because we have to live stream. So please get here on time, and then we'll have potluck, and then after that, after potluck, we'll be here as well to have those different topics of lifting people up through mentoring, tutoring and mentoring, and also financial freedom. Let's go ahead and pray. Father in heaven, Lord, we thank you because you are so loving and caring for us, Lord. You died on the cross when we were needing it the most. And Lord, we just pray that you can use us, that you can teach us, Lord, that how to love people in the same way, how to serve people, that we can understand what your business is all about, letting people see you, that you love them. Lord, we ask that you bless everyone here, that you keep us all safe on our way home, that we can come back tomorrow. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.